Doug Kopp is a very unique individual. He is the rescue chief and disaster manager of the American Rescue Team International, ARTI. Doug's work has brought him many awards, medals, diplomas, and credentials from around the world, such as the designated United Nations Expert 51. Prior to becoming poisoned under the 9/11 rubble and permanently disabled, Doug had worked at almost every major disaster in the world since 1985, except for simultaneous disasters. This program adds something new to preparedness training called the Triangle of Life. Doug is adamant in trying to improve disaster preparedness and training throughout the world, and based on his experience working so many disasters, he knows the old methods just don't work.
Duck and Cover started as a propaganda. It was created by a Madison Avenue marketing company called Archer Productions. During the Cold War, I believe it was 1952, when the Department of Defense, they gave a contract to Archer Productions, Madison Avenue, New York advertising firm, to make some commercials. And those commercials were designed to calm the people who were in a near state of hysteria because the Soviet Union just acquired the nuclear bomb. Building can fall four ways, okay, four different directions, and the components. Walls can fall four different ways, depending on which way the earthquake's coming. You know, it can't fall up, okay? It can only fall down, or it can fall, you know, left to right, front forward, okay? That's it. Now, if the earthquake epicenter, say you've got the San Andreas Fault like this, okay? And your building is on this side, and the earthquake is actually on the San Andreas Fault, or whatever fault it might be. So in other words, you find out in your area, where do most of the earthquakes historically come from? In your area, what direction do they come from? Where's their epicenter? And if you know that, okay, the epicenter is here, and your building is this way, on this side, you know that your building's going to fall down that way, that direction. If you're on this side of it, your building's most likely going to fall down this way, okay? Because the force, as it goes out, because it's like throwing a rock in a pond, you know, the waves go outward like this, okay? As it goes outward, you know, your building will fall down.
The Triangle of Life says that when the shaking starts, you should lie down next to something heavy and strong rather than duck under it. That is where the Triangle of Life will form if the building collapses, a void where you can be safe. You can see this damaged truck. The truck has been compressed, but if someone had been on the outside of the truck, that person would have been safe.
When a building collapses, normally you would expect it to, you know, pancake, okay? There's many, many configurations. Depends on whether it's made of wood, whether it's made of brick, you know, high rise, how many floors, all sorts of different things happen. But, you know, the most common theme is that it will pancake if it doesn't have objects inside. When it has objects inside, those objects compress equal to the weight above them. And when they compress, they create survivable, they don't go down to nothing. But, you know, depending on how much you weight above them, like if it's a car, for example, maybe it'll go from 5 feet high down to 3 feet high. Well, you've got a 3 foot high safe space next to that car. It's a survivable void. And we call it a triangle of life because what happens is the floor hits the top of the object, desk, car, whatever, and then it cantilevers out, and it goes farther and farther out. The weight makes it sag, and it sags down till it hits the floor. And when it hits the floor, it forms essentially a right-angled triangle. And that's why we call it triangle of life. You can find the victims immediately, like I did in the earthquake in China in last July in 2008. I told them how to locate the bodies that couldn't be seen, that were buried in the mud, instead of them randomly digging and taking maybe a couple of weeks or who knows how long to find a body. I told them how to do it instantly, that they could just stand there and see everyone marked. How do I know this, and what is it? In this specific example, what happens when you have soil that's wet and a body underneath, the gases from the body come up through the wet soil, and they exit from the ground, and about this far above the ground, they start to concentrate. So from this far above the ground to about here, about the size of a quart of tomato juice can, okay, they're a cylinder. So from about here to here, with the ground being here, what happens is you get these tiny, tiny bugs swarming inside this concentration of gases coming off the dead bodies. And they mark each body.
We know it's an uphill battle to change people's thinking about things they've been taught and believed for so many years, such as duck and cover. It looks good on paper, but you should also take a look at the experience and facts about the triangle of life. Doug Kopp has been there and done that, so his experience in disaster rescues and the reality of survivability voids or triangle of life should be considered. Training and knowledge are two important parts of disaster preparedness. Just make sure you're armed with the proper knowledge and information.
When I was in that school, I crawled up and down the aisles. And as I did, I saw essentially all the children were under their desks. Every fourth or fifth child was a little hand or a little foot sticking out. And the aisles were huge because, these were, kids that were 13, 14 years old. And I guessed because their entire body, including their head and chest, was now reduced to just being a half-inch thick pulp underneath the desk. And in horror, I'm saying to myself, my God almighty, why are these kids under their desks? Why aren't they in the aisles? Well, it was actually many, many, many years later that I came to find out that there actually were 3 girls in that classroom who were in the aisle, and they survived. Now, Lorena Mirabel Leon is the prime example of the difference between duck and cover and a triangle of life. She was in that classroom. Her legs were under the desk, but her torso was in the aisle. So before I actually got there, her legs were amputated because they were crushed under the desk, crushed down to a half-inch thick, but she survived because her torso was in the aisle. Her 2 friends who were there with her, they watched in horror as all their friends got underneath the desk and were all crushed to pulp. They survived without any injury whatsoever. I have seen this over and over and over and over and over, maybe thousands of times.